Welcome to another episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor.
Welcome, everybody, again to another episode of our show, bringing another really fascinating guest today, involved in creating a better tomorrow for so many people out there. Today, we have the honor of being joined by Emilio Alonso-Mendoza, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Alexander Graham Bell Association for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. He has served in this role since April of 2014, helping to guide the organization in its various international growth and innovation strategies. The organization was actually created way back in 1890, originally as the American Association to Promote Teaching of Speech to the Deaf, and it is an organization that ultimately aims to promote listening and spoken language among people who are deaf and hard of hearing. Headquartered in Washington, D.C., they have chapters located throughout the United States, as well as a network of international affiliates. Prior to taking this role, Mr. Alonso-Mendoza served in multiple roles as president and CEO, including at Take Stock in Children, the Catholic Community Foundation, the Children's Home Society of Florida, and the National Parkinson's Foundation, where he helped establish over 50 centers for research throughout the U.S., Europe, South America, and Asia. He also has served, or currently is serving, on the board of directors of the Children's Home Society Foundation, Leadership Learning Center, St. Vincent de Paul Seminary, and the League Against Cancer, among others. Mr. Alonso-Mendoza received his law degree from the University of Miami School of Law. He also holds a bachelor's degree in journalism from the same school, and also a professional credentialized Certified Fundraising Executive from CFRE International. A lot of really interesting topics to get into today. We're honored to have him. Emilio Alonso-Mendoza, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show today.
Thank you, Ira. Glad to be here.
It's great to have you, Emilio. I would love to start off, as we typically do, really just by handing you the background for a little bit to talk about yourself, a little bit about not just how you got involved in the current organization, but a little bit of your journey today, because it seems like you really care a lot about many issues, obviously a lot of issues focusing on children, and ultimately sort of these unmet needs. To take a little bit of time to sort of just go through yourself and introduce yourself to the audience and a little bit of the journey you've been on.
Well, I describe myself as a recovering attorney because I graduated law school very early, and from there I worked with a family business that was electronic distribution all over Central, South America, and the Caribbean. But ever since, probably even before high school, I was involved in every organization that had a charitable inclination to it, and it's the thing that made me feel good. It's the thing that made me vibe, so to speak. We'll talk about vibing later.
Sure.
But it's it's been said so many times, and I really do believe that I want to leave this world knowing that I left it a little better than I found it. And for me, it was this philanthropic work that drew me to actually be the best part of me. I like the idea. It's good to have a company and have a great bottom line and make money and all that. So been there, done that. But what's really good is the profits, if you want to call it, that you get from doing good.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when you have a dream and actually you get people to believe in this dream, and that you get them to come along and help you. And the one thing that, as you can tell by my accent, I'm not from here, but I always say that the one thing that makes America different is this philanthropic sector. People get together, they identify a cause, and then they get people from their community and from all over to help them, and you get the wonderful results. You get the great philharmonic halls, opera houses, but then you also have all this help for kids with that have the need, whether it be in foster care or whether it be people who need a little step up in education. And so all those things were things that that attracted me to this work.
Excellent, really excellent. And it was quite interesting because obviously, I guess like most people, we hear Alexander Graham Bell. Of course, we think the telephone. We think eventually what happened and became AT&T and all of that, and the Bell system. I was unaware, and maybe I'm admitting to some degree of stupidity here, but I was unaware that Alexander Graham Bell's mother and wife were deaf. His father, grandfather, and brother were all involved in working with speech and speech impediments, and has the history of the organization. Again, he develops the telephone, but he was doing work even before that, focusing on the hard of hearing, and this ultimately leads into what begins in 1890 and takes this journey forward to where we are now. Take us a little bit into this story, because it is a fascinating background that we, I guess, they don't associate as much with Alexander Graham Bell as as these things, but take us a little into the background, if you would. I think it's a really neat story.
It's very interesting. He actually, his mother was deaf, and his father was what was called an elocutionist. At the beginning of the 19th century, it was the Industrial Revolution, and people were making all this money. And so one of the things to being a gentleman was that you had to speak properly, pronounce every word, have a stentorian way of addressing people like this. And his father, that was his job, to help men be more gentlemanly and work on their elocution when they were in a public setting. And so Alexander Graham Bell studied that as well. He then went more into helping the deaf because of his mother. But what was interesting is they left where they were and came to America. And he started working with the deaf. And one of the students that he was working with was a young lady called Mabel Hubbard. And she was 10 years younger than him. And he instantly, he fell in love with her. She thought about it for a while, but then finally, she acceded, and they were married. Actually, they died. Mabel died about 6 months after Dr. Bell died. They were that close. And so if you look at his gravestone, there is a wonderful island called Bembrea, which is in Nova Scotia. And that island, he built a compound with a house for them, and then the other family members. And when you go to his grave site, there's just a stone there that says Alexander Graham Bell, born and died, and it says inventor, teacher of the deaf. That's all he wanted how he wanted to be remembered. it is because of this work with the deaf that I think was the inspiration for him to then, he was a great visionary,
Right.
and it's what led him to the invention of the telephone. And so in this, where I'm sitting now, I don't know if you can see behind me,
Yep.
that's Dr. Bell and a cousin and a good friend who started the Volta lab. And that was really next door to me here. It's a house now, but it used to be the carriage house of his parents' home. And there they created all sorts of experiments that had to deal with sound, etc. And he through the Volta labs, he that was the place where he invented the telephone.
Mm-hmm. The very interesting, when in prepping to talk to you, Emilio, I went to the World Health Organization's sort of database, and specifically looked at sort of what's going on in 2023, and the numbers were kind of startling in the sense that 70 million people around the world are classified as deaf. An additional 430 million have some type of what they term disabling hearing loss. And the projections for 2050 are, again, startling. And again, something like 700 million that will require some type of hearing rehabilitation, with 2.5 billion of some degree of hearing loss. Very large numbers that we might not think about that often. In addition to that, we don't always think about the connections of hearing loss to other chronic degenerative diseases. I recently on a show had Dr. Charlotte Ye at AARP, chief medical officer there, talking about the connections of hearing loss and Alzheimer's dementia, which is something, again, we might not think about with regard to when you think about Alzheimer's disease, but this very interesting connection to when one loses hearing and ultimately sort of the cascade that happens there. So not only sort of pandemic scale issue, but has a lot of connections to all sorts of other conditions. Talk a little about sort of where we are in 2023. I know coming out of a pandemic might not be right to use the word pandemic here, but it really is of that scale of an issue that we're dealing with here.
Well, basically, a lot of the hearing loss is noise induced. Like right now, you have your headphones, and maybe you want to listen to music, and you like a song, and you play it louder, or you go to a concert, and so that actually that wears out, and you start to experience hearing loss. The good thing is that hearing aid manufacturers are getting more and more sophisticated, and they are addressing this need worldwide.
Talk a little bit, if you would, about some of the. I mean, there's several programs that you have at the organization. I thought we could just sort of walk through some of these and sort of some of the key learnings. And I think one of the most important ones is listed sort of there. First and foremost is sort of this importance of early intervention. And I think this makes a lot of sense. And we hear obviously about the importance of prevention in many disease states, whether that's cancer, diabetes, or what have you. Here again, you point out that when it comes to an infant or a child that's deaf or hard of hearing, we have to intervene quite early. Otherwise, the problems get worse. It's more difficult later on. Take us into sort of the topic of the early intervention strategies, if you would.
Well, the thing is, a child, but before we say anything, our ears are just conductors. I mean, we hear through our brain. And a child who is born deaf, if a child, thanks to legislation that we passed many years ago in the United States, a child does not leave the hospital without having a hearing test. Mm-hmm. And if you identify the child as deaf within those first few weeks, and then do what we call early intervention, which is getting hearing devices, and begin therapy. If you start that early on, by the time the child is between 6 and 18 months, it's a great opportunity, if the hearing aids are not enough, to have what's called a cochlear implant. And if a child is fitted with a cochlear implant between 6 and, let's say, 2 years, 6 months and 2 years, with proper therapy, by the time they're 4, 3.5 or 4, they're functioning just like a hearing child. They're able to play musical instruments. They have wonderful speaking voice, and it's all and this is the main thrust of what we do.
Mm-hmm.
We try to make sure that parents are informed that there's many options when a child is deaf. One of them is sign language, but one of them is this. It sometimes people, equality and inclusion sometimes is a little bit jaded because people don't know. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't know that if you identify a child early and you go through this process that I just explained briefly, your child has an opportunity to hear and talk like anybody else in the world. And this is something that is the main, one of the two main things that we do here. Our philosophy is what we call cradle to career. Yeah. So we identify the child and then work with the family, work with the professionals to get the child to a place where then he develops whatever talents and lives what we call a life without limits. And for that, we also credential the professionals who teach these children how to listen and talk. Mm-hmm. And that is the second part of what we do through the A.J. Bell Academy. In between what I was saying about cradle to career, in between the moment that the child is identified, we're there with resources to help parents. We have parent chats. We have, we advise parents as to what professionals, they can go to, et cetera. And in the meantime, we also help them financially. Mm-hmm. With different scholarships, different financial aid, et cetera. So the idea is that as the child grows and there's and the child develops, we're here for support. Mm-hmm. Of both, educational and financial when necessary. That's why fundraising is so important, because, as you said, more and more children are being identified and more children need our services. Mm-hmm. We then, as we said, you said cradle to career, as the child develops, we have different programs. One of the ones that we're the proudest of is a program called LOFT, Leadership Opportunities for Teens. And we do a nationwide search, and over 5 days, a miracle happens here in Washington, D.C., because these 40 kids between the ages of 16 and 18 get together, and some of them had, they're what we say mainstream. They dealt in the school system, but perhaps they had never met somebody that was deaf and had a cochlear implant or a hearing aid like they do. Mm-hmm. Coming here in those 5 days, I say it's a miracle, because they come in one way, and by the end of the program, they are bonded like if they had known each other for years, and they continue, that relationship. After this, if they, we have college scholarships also that we help with. And prior to LOFT, we developed a program during the pandemic, so to speak, mm-hmm. called LEAP, which is because when the kids came to LOFT, one of the comments that they always said was, "Oh my God, it's the end of my high school career. I wish that I had this leadership program. I wish I had met these people years ago. It would have been great to do it before high school."
Right.
And so we decided to create this program. It's online, and it's aimed to kids between 13 and 15. And it's a you go from leap to loft to now we're just beginning a young leadership board, which is taking those people who went through loft into service. And so we're actually lining up the next generation of leadership for the organization.
Excellent. Emilio, take a little time, if you would, to tell us about the numbers behind the hearing aid and cochlear implant markets for those that may be unaware of sort of the space, the technology, and the innovation that's occurred there over the last couple of decades.
By 2030, the cochlear implant market is expected to grow to about $2.6 billion a year as more and more people are made aware that this is a viable option. And it's growing just like the world grows. This market is growing because, like I said before, there's so much of an incidence of hearing loss around the world.
And I mean, just for the audience that may not be less familiar with this, because you were mentioning, obviously, you work with the teachers and credentializing and so forth. You're involved in different sort of merging together some of these different communication options, and one of them, sort of the pieces of this is, I guess what you refer to as total communication, where you put together the implants, the cued speech, the sign language, or sort of into a single package. Just walk us through a little bit of sort of what current sort of communication options are per this total communication model that you have.
Well, people, we believe in parent choice.
Okay.
So what we help here, what we advocate is listening in spoken language. That is what I explained before, that a child gets identified early, and within that time frame, they learn how to listen and talk. The other, there's other options. There's cued speech, there's sign language, etc. But there are organizations that work with that. We don't. Basically, our aim is to work with families and children who chose the listening and spoken language route. And that is, that is basically what we do. That's what our focus is. And we respect everyone's choices. But if a family chooses for their child to hear and talk, that's what we're here for, and that's what we help them with. But of course, there are other organizations that are listed in our website. If the parent wants want their child to sign or do cued speech or whatever, that's a parental choice that we respect greatly.
And the other, as you were mentioning, the different technologies, the hearing aids, the cochlear implants, we do well. I mean, I come out of the life sciences and sort of the biotech field, and we've profiled on the show over the last couple of years, a lot of sort of what's happening now on sort of the bleeding edge of some of these diseases in terms of the cell therapies and the gene therapies and all the high tech stuff that's coming down the path. What's sort of just the feel in your domain for some of these tools, in the sense that if there's a way to repair biologically, maybe not today, but 10 years out, 15 years out, where do some of these initiatives sort of fit in? Is your organization involved in sort of collaborations in any context with sort of the biotech world at all, and seeing what's happening nowadays? What's happening on that front?
Our involvement, there's now what we call precision medicine. So
right.
Gene therapy clinical trials are starting now.
Yep.
We may be 5 years away from finding answers, but we basically work with a few companies. I don't know if I should mention names, but we work with two, Curious and Decibel, and
Okay.
they are,
Sure.
they're looking. There's over 400 genetic causes of hearing loss, and these companies are investigating. So uh, the way that we help them is by giving them advice as to
Hmm.
how we deal with patients, etc. But then also making patients available to them for whatever clinical trials, etc., that they want to undertake.
Hmm.
It's very early,
Yep.
it's very early, but uh, we had a pandemic, and within a year, less than a year, right, we
Yep.
had a vaccine. So it's hopeful.
Yep.
The research that is being done, and of course we always are willing to cooperate with any company, any researcher that wants to undertake this discoveries.
Excellent. Yeah, no, I mean the companies you mentioned, they're right there on the. I know both of them, and they're right there on the cutting edge. So it's great that you're keeping an eye out on what's coming next, because we are in such a unique year, as you were mentioning, per the so the mRNA stuff. But yeah, I mean, who knows what's going to be happening in the next 5-10 years in terms of again, yeah, there's a very big numbers coming out of the World Health Organization, and we need new alternatives. So that's great that you also you keep your ear to the ground for that stuff. I noticed that the World Health Organization had, or has the World Hearing Day. You have obviously a lot of other public facing initiatives. One that's I think coming up is this Vibe with Us program. Sort of take us into what this is all about, because again it's about awareness, it's about sort of the celebration of vibration throughout communication, which is not just hearing. We vibrate with others and with our environment in many unique ways. Talk about what Vibe with Us is all about, if you would.
Well, it came about because I'm always puzzled that so many people all over the world, and especially beginning in the United States, but also all over the world, don't know that children who are deaf can hear and talk.
Mhm.
And so we were trying to make sure that people know that this is a viable option. We're trying to usually people associate deafness with sign language, and that is an option. That's a viable option. But then there's also this option, and people don't know about it. So in a way, it's a little bit inequitable, right? That people
Mhm.
don't know this. And so we had meetings, and we had strategic meetings with marketing people and PR, etc. And we decided, well, uh, vibrations don't discriminate. Every human experience vibrations. They make us happy. They make us sad. And we want to, invite our audiences to what we came up with, come vibe with us and experience the power and the beauty of vibrations. And so there's going to be our primary target audience now is 20 to late 30s year old, because a lot of them are the ones that are beginning to have families, have children, et cetera, et cetera. And we want to make them aware that in case their child is born deaf, they have our option available to them through the Alexander Graham Bell Association. But it's also a way to, there's so much competition in social media. Everybody has, their Instagram accounts and their followers and all that. And so one of the ways to lead people in is through this vibrations that come vibe with us campaign. We started it on World Hearing Day, which funny enough, it celebrated March the 3rd, which is
Yeah.
the birth date of Alexander Graham Bell.
Yep.
So we did like a soft launch, and now it's going to be incremental. This month of May is Better Hearing and Speech Month, but I know that all those dates are great, it's a good day to do things that day, but to us, hearing is 365 days a year, for as many hours a day as you're awake.
Yep.
So the campaign is evolving, and we're attracting different people to partner with us. So, but basically to make the public aware that if you're born deaf and your child is born, I mean, if your child is born deaf, there's this opportunity with early identification and with early intervention for the child to hear and talk and live a life without limits, which is what we call it.
And I'm looping back here because obviously we do a lot on tech and innovation, but I just want to ask you about one thing that's in the Vibe with Us materials. There's this one little section where you sort of educating me and everyone's reading it on something called cross-modal plasticity, which talks about how when one loses a certain sense like hearing, that other senses become more sharp. And it was specifically talking in this case about the skin, vibrations that can be picked up by the skin. And then it was mentioning how there's people now that are getting in sort of the wearable area to pick up these vibrations as well, as part of, again, this sort of this all-encompassing system. Can you just say a couple words about that one? Because I thought that was, I've heard about it, but I didn't realize that people were actually developing technologies to access.
I didn't know it. I didn't know it either.
Okay.
And then somebody brought it to my attention that now there's clothing that that help you feel better. So we're working with some of those manufacturers. I can't say yet because
that's fine.
But we're working with some of them to do some fun things so that people can experience the feel of vibrations and then slip in there the fact that that kids who are born deaf can hear and talk through the power of vibrations.
Excellent. Yeah, that was just another, again, that was just another little cool little fun fact that stood out.
When we deal with a manufacturer, we'll get you a piece of clothing that so you can
awesome.
Feel.
Awesome. So we mentioned World Hearing Day. Vibe with Us. You got Volta Voices, which is the magazine of the organization. What else is hot for 2023 that we should all know about? Anything coming up? Other conferences, other talks you may be giving, places that we can listen to you, potentially meet you, or members of the organization. Anything else you want to mention, please take that.
Yeah, well, what happened, we have a symposium. We've had a symposium for professionals every year. And one of the silver linings of the pandemic was that this symposium used to be live, in a hotel or a conference hall or whatever. And we would have 300 to 400 participants. Along comes a pandemic, and we decide, well, we're going to do this online, and we're going to do it over 2 days. And lo and behold, we now that 300 to 400 person conference, which was basically 85 to 90% U.S. professionals, is now over 1,000 professionals all over the world with 54 countries participating. And that to me is one of the beautiful things and one of the power of technology that for us, we are limited in resources. Here we're able to reach this whole worldwide audience through the power of Zoom. We have this webinar, and not only is it a great experience during those 2 days. Afterwards, the people who sign up get to repeat any lectures or anything that they like in the program because it's taped, and so they have access to it from 6 to 8 weeks after the program.
Yeah, it's if one thing, this new era we're in has really given it's the ability to make those connections. And as you were saying, I mean, that's just
And
another
because of that, then there's an interest that when you're talking about what's new in 2023.
right.
Because of that, there's a worldwide. We've always had worldwide respect. You know, Dr. Bell, when he founded this association back in the 1890s, he wrote all over the world and asked for books that had anything that had been written about deafness. And he created in this building, it was a 3-story library. And I call it the first Google on hearing, on hearing loss, because he just accumulated books from all over. We have books here from the 16th century in all sorts of languages talking about deafness. And so when his whole vision was a worldwide vision. It was a worldwide vision that people who were deaf at that time, that people who were deaf, we could talk when he started. And he knew that maybe one day they could hear. And so now through these webinars and through this symposium, we've had even wider world appeal. So professionals in those countries want to obtain our certification. And a year ago, we translated the exam, which was in English, into Spanish. And when we had 7 certified Spanish professionals, we now have close to 60. And that's only in a year, because they were able to study in their language and take the exam in their language. And now, eventually, we will do that in several other languages, you know, Arabic, Portuguese. Those are some of the things that are on the table for the next couple of years.
Awesome. Really awesome. And yeah, I mean, it's clearly, you know, you're Dr. Bell will be proud that you are championing this this innovation and progress within the organization, and, you know, on the cusp of such amazing things in 2023, and serving, you know, as we pointed out with some of these numbers, a really unmet need all around the world. So, you know, I'm going to continue to follow you, Emilio, root you on, and the organization. Again, for everybody that's going to be listening to this particular episode of our show across the various podcast networks or watching on the YouTube channel, you've been spending time with Emilio Alonso-Mendoza, Chief Executive Officer of the Alexander Graham Bell Association for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. Emilio, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come talk with us, educate us on these topics for a little while. Obviously, thank you for everything you're doing there at the organization. And as we like to say on our show, you know, thank you and for making a better tomorrow for all these people. Really, it's a great story. And again, all the best with the programs moving forward.
Thank you, Ira. It's been a privilege to be here. And I hope that anybody who's watching and they want to have more information, they go online to www.agbell.org and they can, contact us there. And again, thank you for helping us let the world know that children who are born deaf today can hear and talk and live a life without limits. Thank you very much.
Great story. Thank you so much, Billy.